what do we do when that special person, that person that we love and care about, they bring some hard news, or they bring maybe a personal struggle to us? And what should be our response in that space? How do we become a conduit to Christ in the healing process? Today, we're going to kind of unpack what it looks like to lean into those spaces with someone we care about as they bring their struggles forward. Welcome to Hope and Recovery, a Fellowship Celebrate Recovery podcast that shares hope and healing for a mental, spiritual, emotional, and relational journey through life change stories and recovery topics, all centered around the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5 and the Celebrate Recovery principles, where Jesus helps us to acknowledge and face our hurts in our lives so that we can get to those unhealthy core beliefs, toxic core beliefs that may lead us into some spaces of unhealthy habits, or maybe some defenses or protections that ultimately cause havoc on the relationships in our life. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with drugs and alcohol and perfectionism. My name is Rodney. I'm the pastor and ministry leader of Fellowship Celebrate Recovery here in Rogers, and it's so good to be here with you today. Excited about today's topic as we're unpacking just what should our response be? What do we do in those spaces when somebody we care about is struggling? And I brought a couple brothers into this conversation with me. They're part of our Fayetteville Celebrate Recovery, David and Andy. So guys, welcome. Introduce yourself and we'll jump into a conversation.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having us. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. I struggle with anxiety and depression, sexual addiction, and grief. And my name is Andy.
Hey, Andy.
Hey, Andy. And hey, I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. I struggle with anger, codependency, and depression. And my name is David.
Hey, David. So, guys, we were just unpacking this, and there's a lot of different angles we can go. Maybe we start here. Where's some ways that just that idea of someone's coming to me and they're struggling, I care about them, I love them, they're talking about a hard thing. What's some ways that can go bad that you've seen in just the way we respond to people that's maybe not productive? Maybe we start there.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's probably an easy spot to start. I think probably one way that's probably really unhelpful is just thinking about me in the midst of my struggles and in my pornography addiction, for example, part of my story. One of the biggest fears that I had was that what I was dealing with was this awful thing that if people knew about it, they'd be disgusted. They wouldn't want anything to do with me. And so the idea of going to somebody and admitting that, one of the things I was most scared of is that they'd be totally shocked, and they would have this visceral kind of, maybe not even outright rejection, but kind of the messages of like, oh wow, I can't believe you're doing that. Like those type of messages in there that maybe come up for good reasons, because maybe it is one of those things that shocks us a little bit. But in that place, as our brain is trying to figure out what's going on there, we may unintentionally issue some shame messages to the person coming to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. David, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the shame word immediately was the first thing that came to mind. It's like the last thing that I need, if it's me coming to the table with a struggle, is immediate shame message. And it honestly takes me back a part of my recovery all the way back to college with a college roommate, which that was the name of the game for him, was shame and guilt. And he was a master at using the scripture to pull that off, you know? And so, which kind of reminds me of the Job scenario in the Old Testament. Some so-called friends come in to fix Job, but it's really just, let's just browbeat you with scripture and shame you to death. And so I do think that's right out of the gate, that is not the approach that's going to bring healing and life change.
Yeah. So it feels like you kind of want to make space for that family member. It may have parent listening, and this is pretty common in today's world. We'll get a phone call. My son, I discovered my son is looking at pornography, and it is a shock. Yeah. So we can't act like it's not a shock, right? Because we don't want that. This is someone in your family you care about. What is the good reasons why they might have that kind of visceral response in their body, right? It's like, this person means a lot to me. But what do you think? What's some of those things that would make sense just to kind of honor what we may be feeling? We want to get to creating a different reaction, different response. But what would be some of those reasons that shame or beating them to death with Scripture, as you said, David? What would be some of those reasons why we would go to that strategy, knowing it's hurtful?
Well, I think maybe as a family member or a parent, immediately you may think your identity is tied into this.
I failed.
Yeah. My identity, my reputation. What if people around me found out that my kid struggles with this? And then probably fear, right? I mean, it's just like, what do I do? How do I handle this? And so I think it probably, I don't know all the psychological and physiological dynamics, but I'm sure there's a lot of things happening chemically and electronically in the brain and just in our emotions and in our body that would probably easily push us toward a response out of fear, out of uncertainty versus, can I sit in this moment with my child?
Yeah.
And even just, we say it a lot around here, but just be curious.
Yeah.
In love, just to be curious. Hey, I know this is going on. Let's talk about it, because I know I'm your parent, but man, I'm a sinner too.
Yeah.
And I've done wrong things. And let's not pretend, because especially like I can imagine a father and a son, just, can I tell you that I struggle with temptation too?
Yeah.
Just kind of clear the air, I think would be beautiful. But I do think, to your question, I think some of those initial responses could be a lot of fright, fear, panic, go into protect mode.
That identity piece is big in it. I mean, if you're struggling, which there's some codependency in that, if you're struggling, what does that say about me? And so now I'm having that response. Andy, thoughts?
Yeah. And even just the thought of, man, this wasn't something that I had on my radar was going to be a part of my story. And so there's some initial trying to navigate the shell shock of like, I wasn't expecting this, and now this is here. And what do I do with this? Because it's affecting me too. And in that place, especially the thing that was coming to my mind is, what if it's an area that somebody brings to us? Like if I'm a parent and my kid is bringing to me the fact that he's struggling with pornography, that's a part of my story. That's a part of my struggles. And I could see it rising up in me of like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to go down just the trail of what ifs, and is he going to struggle just the same way that I did? And then maybe if let's say it's an active struggle that's going on in my life, maybe there's some more of my own shame that comes online in that place of like, and feeling helpless. I can't fight this myself, so how can I help my kid fight through it? Those types of thoughts that could come up in that. And so I think there's a huge part of, man, what if somebody brings something to us? What if a kid brings something to us that's a part of our story too? And especially if it isn't something that we've sought healing for ourselves. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
If there was some stuff that came up.
That's interesting. That's definitely an angle. But then there's also just the sheer, and I think fear is a good word. And why don't I respond with that love and care in that space is, my fear is, will it be justifying? Will it give you permission to keep doing that? Well, you say you struggle. Well, I'll just keep on, it's interesting just thinking about the narratives that, even if we're in a good spot as a parent, we can kind of go down into that pit of, back to the identity piece, but the fear of, if I sit with you in this and just be present, will that give you permission to keep on doing it? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I definitely think there is that danger there. I think too, wrapped up in this shame thing too is even perhaps if there's a parent like, wow, I still struggle with this, but what if it's something they don't struggle with anymore, but they remember, in my teen years, I did this and a whole lot more. So in my mind, I may minimize that a little bit because I feel old guilt, old shame.
Yeah.
And almost like in the message inside, which I think comes from the enemy, is, well, you don't have any right to speak into this because you failed too, right? Instead of appealing lovingly to the word, which tells me, no, I'm still entrusted with the care of my daughter and my son. Even if I've failed, truth is truth from God, right? So I can lovingly convey truth out of a heart of, I made those mistakes too, but I don't want that for you. So how can I step in this and help you?
Yeah.
So I think that another danger is I could minimize it because of my own old shame and guilt from maybe my past. So
yeah. Well, and what's the cost of minimizing it to the person that's actually sharing?
Yeah. Well, especially I'm thinking if I'm a parent and I've got, I think of my little boy, if when he's a teenager, come to me with that, man, what did it take for him to work up the courage to go, all right, I'm going to finally tell Dad this. And he brings me into it. And I'm like, oh man, that's not a big deal. And just shut it down like that. I might miss his heart in that too. This is a big deal for this person bringing it to me. How can I stay curious and meet them in that place and try and catch what they're feeling in that spot?
Well, and sometimes it is like, oh, it's not a big deal, but sometimes the minimizing it is, don't do that again. Just move on. That's a one thing. Just don't do it again, and just kind of stop it, kind of the Bob Newhart approach, which can be just as damaging. So we try to control it. There's some control in that, I'm guessing, that if I can control this, maybe it won't happen again. So I'm just going to shut it down. Don't do it again. Just promise me you'll never struggle again. And then probably creates a little bit wobbliness for future conversations, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do we keep because what we're describing there is we're a little bit dysregulated. All right. Someone, again, I want to honor if this is someone you care about, maybe it is a friend, maybe it is a child, maybe it's a family member. They're bringing this to you. You're getting a little bit dysregulated in your body, your heart rate picks up, either getting your words per minute are going up or you're shutting down. Your own shame's coming online. So how do we, as we're thinking about being on the other side of the receiving end of this, how do we, what's some words of encouragement we can give to that person to maybe respond in a better way and not push them away or shut them down or whatever? What's some feedback you guys would give?
Yeah, I think one of those things for me that anytime I've got somebody bringing something hard to me, and I'm going to steal something from you, but like I hear you say often whenever you hear somebody say, man, I've never told anybody this before in my life. Those are really sacred words. And so seeing that moment as, man, this is a gift. This is such a gift that I have a chance to be able to meet this person in there. And I know sometimes there may be different relationship dynamics that it's hard to see it as that. But I think one of the best things that we can say is, man, thank you for bringing me into that. And I think one thing that does, even just for me, the thought of me bringing stuff to me is like, okay, it's okay for me to talk about this. Doesn't mean it's fixed. It doesn't mean that there's not different things that are going to happen as a result of bringing this into the light. But at the very least, I don't have to keep holding it on.
Yeah.
And somebody's receiving it and they're with me in it.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't mean there's not consequences, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
just because I'm bringing it to you and I'm with you, and it doesn't mean that there's not going to be consequences, depending on what it is. I mean, there's lots of different scenarios. David, what's your thoughts, man? How do you help that person kind of be regulated in that space?
I mean, just thinking about sitting with a buddy yesterday, and him talking about some very specific struggles, and just to be able to sit there and whether I specifically say, "Oh, you struggle with that too," fellow struggler, man.
Yeah,
right here, and it may look different.
Yeah,
if I say, man, I struggle with sexual temptation too. Now, how that plays out and can be different for the two of us, but I'm getting at the heart of it. It's like, yeah, you're a guy, I'm a guy.
Yeah.
And there's an enemy at work, and our flesh is at work, and man, let's just talk about it. And, what does that look like for you? And I'm going to let them in on what that looks like for me, in my journey in that. And to me, that then affects that feeling probably on them of just like, what was the word you used?
Regulating.
Yeah.
I love that you said, so you're kind of regulating yourself, but you're actually regulating them by being regulated.
Right. Yep. And honestly, in that context too, as I've worked on my own codependency, in the back of my mind, I'm reminding myself, David, you don't have to fix this over a breakfast, right? As a matter of fact, you're not the one who can fix this, but maybe we can have some good conversation. Maybe I can share some of my story and tools that the Lord has blessed me with through recovery, through His Word. But ultimately, it's not on me. He has to make the choice to put into practice some things that I know will work.
Yeah,
and that's hard because my performance-based thing really kicks in gear. We're like, man, it'd be great to just see this guy walk out of here saying all the right things, and I know he's going to do all the right things.
It's a miracle.
But, so but I think approaching it that way, I'm just going to be real. I'm going to be a fellow struggler at this table. I'm not here to fix him.
Yeah.
But if anything, like you said, just to be a listening ear to a guy who maybe for the first time is sharing something he's never told anybody.
Yeah, that's good. I want to take a second just to let you know, if you're listening and you've never heard of Celebrate Recovery, we'd love for you to be a part of what happens here at Fellowship CR. We meet every Friday night on our Fayetteville campus and our Rogers campus, and we would love for you to join us. If you want more information, go to fellowshipcr.org and join us in this movement called Celebrate Recovery. We'd love for you to join us every Friday night, 6 p.m. Connection Cafe, 7 p.m. the general meeting starts. Join us this Friday night on either campus, Fellowship Fayetteville or Fellowship Rogers. So, Andy, you were kind of alluding to this a little bit, that imagining your son bringing this to you. And hey, thanks for sharing that. How important is it to, I think our temptation, or maybe I am me statements, my temptation is to try to get to what's next. Right? So the thanks for telling me that keeps us there. But I wonder how we can kind of hold the experience with that person on what it was like to actually bring that to you with a buddy at the table, right? It's like, I know I need to bring this up. I'm going to bring it up, or my son comes to me or whatever. How important is that to just kind of honor the experience of the actual sharing?
Oh yeah. Well, and that's one thing. Just even noticing like the body language of the person coming to us is something that I've found helpful, of like, oh man, dude, thank you so much for telling me that. Brother, I could tell there was something that you needed to say.
Yeah.
And man, it's out there now. Mm-hmm. You got it. Man, thanks for letting me know. Thanks for bringing me into that. Feels like you've been carrying that for a while, hasn't it? And just asking that, staying with them in it, man. Well, brother, how does your heart feel right now? Just knowing that that's out in the open now, and we can talk about it. Tell me about that, and then it allows me to stay curious with their heart right there in the moment. Hey, I'm in you there. Hey, even right now as we're talking about it, is there any fears coming up for you right now, or I just want to make sure like I'm with you in this. Yeah. Just kind of having those checkpoints in the conversation, especially if I'm noticing in there, man, this is a hard thing for them to talk about, and giving them permission that it's okay if it's, man, it makes sense if it's hard to talk about. You've never talked about this before, man.
Yeah. But you, David, any thoughts on that?
Reframe that question for me one more time.
Yeah. So just, we kind of get to, you just dropped a bombshell in my lap, right? And I loved your posture of just, you too, I struggle too. How do we sit with them? So it's kind of like this picture that pops in my head. If my kids or my grandkids fall down and break their leg, everything that they need from me in that moment is to just come scoop them up, right? But we can go to work and I'm just going to repair the leg right now. It's like, I don't have any business repairing the leg. I can't repair the leg. I'm not trained as a physician. I might be able to call for help, but how do I bring comfort to you in your distress? To kind of sit with you in that. I love the question of just that, man, what was that like to even share that with me right now?
Yeah.
And not assume I know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's two things. I can go back to what Andy said of just even, I think you framed it like, what are you feeling right now? And I think there's so much importance of being able to put words around what I actually feel.
Yeah.
I could say, well, I feel pretty bad right now. It's like, well, go a little deeper with that. What does that look like? What is bad? I feel shame. Great. I feel alone. I feel threatened. Help them put words to feelings, because I needed help with that. I remember in my first step study getting that list of feeling words and being able to just look over that and go, man, those are some words I've never thought about putting alongside what I'm going through, but it feels good to identify those. So I think giving space to maybe help them find words for what those feelings are.
Yeah.
I think there can be a lot of healing in that. But then also, I think that idea, again, kind of referencing Job, of can I just also be a really good listener, and not feel like if they take a breath, I need to inject my next great wisdom nugget, right? But instead being comfortable with the silence, and just knowing that a pause doesn't mean a time to inject. That's something I've learned as I've gone to the South Dakota Rosebud Reservation, and we've talked about Native American culture. It's like if someone's talking and they stop, that doesn't mean they're done.
Yeah.
That just means they're reorganizing. And so learn to be...
Well, that's so good, because in body language is a good thing to read. Watch their eyes, watch their face, what's happening in the pause.
Yeah,
it's like, ooh, I don't want to rush by this. They're about to let me into I call that the scary parts of my heart. Yeah, they're about to let me in, and that's that's a good word. Just kind of pausing and letting it breathe a minute.
Yeah, and then as I think about the response. I still want to lean into how do I still bring my own brokenness and struggle and victory as well into it. How do I weave that into my response?
Right.
Again, knowing I'm not going to fix this today, but is there a ray of hope that I can give in this?
Yeah.
Is there just a reinforcement of, man, I'm a fellow struggler too.
Yeah.
And hopefully this won't be the last time you let me in.
Yeah. And I want to go back to something you said so important, that, I've got to come up with the nugget of wisdom here. And we put that pressure on ourselves, right? And I often tell people, hey, I'm not holding anything back from you. I don't have a magic wand. If I'm meeting with a couple, hey, I'm not holding anything back. I'm not keeping anything from you right now. This is going to be hard, but I'm just here with you. I'm with you in it. But we put that pressure on ourselves, don't we, to try to kind of come up with the magic statement, and gosh, they came to me, so I've got to be just this wealth of knowledge. And we talked about that on a prior podcast, that, you know, our presence is so much more valuable. It didn't even come close to how much we know, right? It's like, how much wisdom are you going to give me at this? You just being present with the buddy you're talking about was huge. Just sitting with him was a game changer, because somebody saw me in my pain. But we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, don't we?
Yeah. Well, and I think being able to give myself permission to say, oh man, I wish I could fix this for you, brother. But I don't have the answer for you, but hey, I promise I'm going to walk alongside you in it.
Yeah.
I'm with you in it.
Yeah.
You're not scaring me.
Yeah, I can't personally fix it, but I think, you know, it is important, and you alluded to that. How do I give them some hope?
Yeah.
And I love that statement. Jesus loves me where I am, but he loves me too much to leave me where I am. Right?
Yeah.
So we do have a part, but I think it is the order of it.
Yes.
So I'm going back to the parent situation. I want to connect with that child that's bringing this scary, shameful thing to my attention, to love them in that space. But then how do I offer some hope, right? And I think that's one of the ways we minimize it as a society. It's like, well, everybody struggles with that. You know, you're just going to have to just grind it out. You know, you're never going to really have true freedom. And it's like, wow, I don't have a whole lot of hope here. But I think given some, so what's next? And I like the idea of inviting them into that plan. Where do we go from here in your mind? I'd love to kind of know. You've been stewing on this for a lot longer than I have. We've been talking for 30 minutes here. What do you think needs to happen next? I have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear from you, instead of me just kind of swooping in and saying, you need to do this, you need to do this, because they really don't need that until it's really becomes their strategy. But any thoughts on that, on how do you get them to that line of hope? What's that look like from you guys?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that I know was important for me was, before any strategy and in any particular thing, was just to know that another person was with me in it. And so for me, that's the first thing in it, is like, hey, I'm with you in it. We'll walk through this together. You're not alone in this, man. And I promise, I know there's a lot of other people that are dealing with stuff. In fact, I've been listening to this Hope and Recovery podcast, and there's a lot of stories on there of people. But that's a really good question of, hey man, what do you feel like needs to happen here? Like, what are some ideas that you have? I know some people, I know some resources, and that's probably a thing to think through, is like, I don't have the answers, but there are other people that are experts in a lot of different areas. And so what does it look like to call somebody? What are some good practical things? And even being able to say, like, hey, do I have permission to ask somebody some ideas on this? It's kind of setting up those next step conversations, or like, if I've got a buddy that's coming to me, man, thank you so much for letting me into this, brother. I don't want this to be the last conversation that we have on this, man. Do you want to get breakfast every now and then and just kind of talk about it? You need somebody to text. If it's a kid, if it's one of my kids, I'm letting them know, all right, man, well, hey, I'm with you in this. Let's keep talking about this.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of setting up that further relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. And bringing them into community in this, because, one of my go-to things, and this is all through Celebrate Recovery, is as I'm listening to a guy who's struggling with a particular area, sometimes I'm thinking, I know a guy he needs to talk to.
Yeah. Try networking a little bit.
Yeah, it really is, because I just feel like, I've got my story, but Andy's story may speak more specifically to what this guy's going through and his experience. And so why not? And that way now Andy and I are together in this with this brother,
Right.
and then he's also learning through that the value of community. I'm not going to put all of my trust in David, right? But instead, no, okay, I see. It's valuable to have 2 or 3 guys that I can trust in this process.
Yeah.
And so, and whether that's a one-on-one or I say, hey, can we grab lunch this week? I'll invite Andy to come and let's just sit down and process this some more. I'd love for you to hear from his angle.
Yeah.
Because he'll be gut level honest too.
Well, that makes me think too. That's probably good for if a parent is listening. It's probably not appropriate for you to be their accountability partner, right?
Yeah.
Number one, it's probably not, even if you have a really good relationship, them coming to you, because it is a process. You have these ups and downs as you're trying to find recovery, right?
Yeah.
Is, hey, I'm going to point you to someone. And by the way, I'm not going to get updates on what you guys are talking about. When you go to your meetings or the ministry and talk to the pastor, whatever, I'm not going to, well, what do they talk about? Unless it's like a harm thing, I'm going to hurt myself. That's a whole different conversation. But I think we have to establish that safety that it's probably not good for mom to be the accountability partner for her son. One, it's not going to be good for mom because she's going to constantly be in this place of anxiety, worrying, and but to speaking to that community thing, maybe it is pointing to someone else and handing off.
Yeah.
And now I'm just supporting you. How you doing? How you holding up? Are you feeling good about things? That kind of thing. So
Absolutely.
I think that's a good word, especially for our parents, with kids bringing stuff to it. And that's hard to do because our whole job description is to control the development of our children. Mm-hmm. And now you've got this teenager that has this issue that it's become an addiction or whatever. And maybe it's not appropriate for me to be the one to speak into that, because this is why we don't have family members in the same groups. Because I may not share this because I don't want to hurt you. Again, even if you have the greatest relationship, and I hear that all the time. It's like, no, we're good. But there's always going to be that check mark in my brain going, I don't know if I should share this. And if there's any question and we care about that person, we're not going to share it. So kind of some closing thoughts on that. If you got someone that maybe they have a loved one that's brought some hard news recently, and maybe it didn't go well, or they're just trying to figure out how to respond differently. I hesitate to say better, but just differently in the next conversation with this person. Any closing words of encouragement that you would give to our listeners that might be on the receiving end of that want to do it differently? Maybe blew it on the first interaction or multiple interactions. Any words of encouragement?
Yeah. I think the first one would be, man, give yourself some grace and kindness.
Yeah.
It's hard whenever we're not expecting something, when it comes up, and it makes sense that those things came up for you. And not saying if it went poorly, not saying, hey, I want you to repeat that, but like just give yourself some grace and just know, hey, you can learn to do this better. And I've never had a conversation with somebody where they've brought something up to me where it has gone absolutely perfectly. Mm-hmm. There's always moments, even now, where times that anxiety comes up for me, and I've been doing this a while, and so it's okay. And if you can stay curious in there, and give space,
just give yourself grace.
Yeah. And if you just really royally blew it that first time, to just call them up, or the next time you meet, just look them square in the eye and go, you know what?
I blew it.
I really blew it, man. Don't get me wrong. I wanted to be here for you, and I still do. But I feel like I handle that just really wrongly. So I want to make amends for that.
Love that.
And I haven't ever heard of, those kinds of situations backfiring. If they do, there's a lot more unhealth there than, but to be that honest and in essence, broken in humility, I think just opens the door even more.
That's good.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Repair. Yeah. And even in the moment, right? We're sitting down and you just shared something. I was like, oof, right. It hit me. I had this visceral response that you were talking about, Andy. Maybe I just say, I responded in a way, maybe right then it's like, hang on a second. That didn't come out right. This is new to me. You've been carrying this, but this is hitting me. This is new. I love you and I care for you. And that came out wrong. Can we reset? Yeah. I'm sorry, that came out wrong. And I know that had to be hurtful. And so even in the moment, I love that if you reflect, oof, that went bad, going to pick up the phone. But even in the moment, if we're aware of that, so important because we want to, again, just revisiting, they came to you because they love and trust you. And so you have a great opportunity to get them to the next step. And the cool thing is we have so many resources out there.
Oh my gosh.
You don't have to carry this weight. And I love what you said, Andy, just give yourself some grace in that. And there's no handbook for this.
No.
With any relationship, right?
Right.
Whether it's a friend or whatever.
And we all know it's a process. I mean, I'm just sitting here. I just went to my doctor yesterday. You guys know that I've had issues with a regular heartbeat and had an ablation a few years ago, but started doing some weirdness. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to sit with my doctor. So it began a process of sitting face to face with the doctor and just being gut level honest, right? And even though I don't want to admit that my body is weak and does weird things, got to face up to that, but brought him into it, and that began a plan.
Yeah.
He knew, man, here's what you need to do next. And then I'm going to get you to see this guy next, And I could have said, no, I want to see you only. I want you to do, if I need another ablation, I need you to do it. It's like, no, it's going to take some other folks in a process. But because I trust him and I've been able to be vulnerable with him before, I'm willing to continue to walk that journey with him. And I think that's it. I mean, every time we sit and listen, every time we express our own frailty, there's greater trust. And this is going to be probably a long haul relationship. And it'll have ups and downs, but it'll be good. Yeah,
that's good. And when you were talking, it reminded me of this. Just a quick point on accountability groups. Sometimes they can become, hey, just come tell me how bad you screwed things up this week. And while we want to be honest about our shortcomings, so that is an important part of the process. Maybe in your relationship with the people that you're accountable with, instead of leading with where all the things I screwed up with, where did you bring life to your family today? Where did you get it right today? Maybe that's where we start. Yeah. And then we're lifelong learners. I'm going to hurt you guys today. You're probably going to hurt me. We're just human beings in relationship. And so when we get it wrong, we repair. But where am I bringing life? And that's a good lens to not just focus on the negative things, so that's not the dynamic of the relationship. Because if it feels like that's all our relationship is me bringing my garbage to you, I'm going to start canceling appointments. I don't want to be around you because I don't know if I can share one more time how bad I am with you. But I want to talk about where I'm getting it right. And so that's kind of that, what do I want to get away from? What do I want to move toward? That freedom from, freedom for kind of an idea. So good stuff, guys. Thanks for your insight and your wisdom in that. And hopefully this is helpful for our listeners. So hopefully it was helpful for you. And if you're in a tough spot, you've got someone in your family that is struggling and they trusted you and had the courage to bring this to you. Obviously, we don't want them to stay there. We got to honor that this is important to you, that you want them to be in a better path. But sit with them, connect, process with them, and then let's get them to next steps, which may mean that you don't have to carry this as by yourself, as David was talking about. There's tools and resources out there. They just need to know they're loved and that you're with them in that. and then trust the process. Trust God through the process. That's a big component of this. I hope this encourages your heart. And by the way, Celebrate Recovery is for you too. If you're on the receiving end of this, maybe by default, you've been lunged into recovery, so you can join us on a Friday night as well. Hey, thanks for being with us today. If you want more information, go to fellowshipcr.org. Hope you'll join us next time. Until then, God bless.